G'day guys, in this video series I'm going to be talking to you about the World Team Championships of Warhammer 40k from the perspective of the captain of and World Eaters player for Team Australia. We're going to dig into the preparation for the event, how that all went down and what our team strategy was. We're going to dig into the War Masters singles event, we're going to talk about my list in detail, and we're also going to break down every round, every game that we played into every other opponent from nations all around the world. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the World Team Championships and Team Australia, this video series is for you. Let's get into it.
Look for the Blood God.
Alrighty guys, welcome back to my WTC recap series where we're talking all things WTC for Team Australia. We've already covered off my list, the Team Australia strategy, we've talked about team events in general and how the format works and all of that, and we've also covered the first 3 rounds from the pod phase of the team's event itself, as well as the War Masters for those of you interested in that. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the first 2 games from the Swiss stage. So this is day 4, and we played some really cool games into Spain and into Austria. So we're going to be talking about those rounds, what happened with Team Australia, and what happened with my personal matchups as well. So with that being said, let's get stuck into talking about Team Spain, who were the people we played in round 4. Now, there were a few interesting things here with Team Spain. First thing to note is that this is where, for me personally, the wheels started falling off. Team Australia was still performing exceptionally well. However, my performance starts to take a bit of a dip at this point of the event, in part because I was playing up against stronger players, in part because fatigue had started kicking in, and also in part because the list was tested into a lot of things, but not tested into others. And as a result, there was a little bit of a data problem where we didn't really understand how it was going to work into certain matchups. So a lot of things contributed to my personal downfall at this point. However, the team was still performing really well, and there are still plenty of interesting takeaways from my games. So let's get stuck into Team Spain. Before I talk about the event, it's the matchup into Team Spain, there are a couple of things that I want to address that you may have heard of, may not have. One of them is that during our round into Team Spain, everybody that we played were absolutely lovely, and there was some really fun games. However, 4 out of the 8 players on Team Spain actually clocked out. So using chess clocks at this event, you basically, if you run out of time, you can't continue, playing. This wasn't that big of a deal. Most of them clocked out in turn 5, and it wasn't an issue. However, WTC do have a rule that stipulates that if 3 or more players clock out, that team is automatically assigned a yellow card, which is, I think it's a 25-point penalty, if I remember correctly, off of their score. And basically, we'll see in a moment, but basically Australia got a draw with Spain, and the head referee came over to me and basically gave me an opportunity to not apply their yellow card. He basically said, look, technically, yes, they will deserve a yellow card for this. However, if you would like to, you can use your captain's discretion to just say, oh, let's give 5 minutes worth of time. And this is well after the round is finished. He's like, we can give 5 minutes of time from one of our players to there and one of our players to there. And as a result, they only have 2 people clocked out, which means they dodge the yellow card. So he basically put it on me to make that decision. So I then went to my team and basically said, look, guys, what do we want to do here? And we decided that we have no intent on playing that sort of game. They got a draw into us fair and square. We don't want to use the chess clock rules to try to weaponize it and try to, hurt their scores. So we unanimously decided that we would, be forgiving and not apply that yellow card. So I then basically went over to their team and basically called their captain up, and I was like, look, man, I'm sure you're aware of the situation where, you guys clocked out and there's yellow cards potentially. But Team Australia has no intent on doing that, and we all had a big hug as a team with the Spanish team and celebrated, and it was a real wholesome moment where it just shows that the level of sportsmanship at the WTC is reciprocal and appreciated, and it's truly inspiring. Then, however, we went off and my team were like, heads down a little bit because we got a draw and we were hoping for a win. But this one, we had the mission special rule of raise the banners, where you basically, if your battle line units can raise objectives. Now, unfortunately, one of my players had forgot to score his banners, right? And he sits there, and we realize this after the round's done, after the conversation about clocks has taken place, after all the results are in, but before the next round was paired. And he basically realized that if he had put that score in, he would have won his game by one additional point, which means we would have won the round into Spain. And I'm like, oh my god. And then one of my other players realized that he forgot to score 4 points worth of primary on one of the turns. And if he had have done that, he also would have got an extra point, and he would have. So either one of those two would result in us winning. And I'm like, guys, it's so late. It's so late. Like the round is done. However, if what you're saying is true, and we do actually win the round, then obviously we would like the scores to reflect what actually took place. So before getting the judges involved, I basically went over to their captain. I'm like, look, man, I hate to do this to you, but I need your player that played against our player to sit down. And we basically, the two captains and two players sat down, and we said, look, do you agree that he forgot to show the banners? We pulled out the score sheet, and you could see that my player hadn't scored any banners. And they're like, but do you agree that on the first turn he did put a unit out onto this one and score a banner, and then on the next turn he did that one and this one and that one? The opponent agreed. The opponent agreed, yes, you definitely raised 4 banners, and I can see you did not record them. So, yes, you did win. And I basically said to the captain, like, are you happy for us to take this to the referees to update the score to actually reflect the game? And they basically said, reluctantly, they said yes, because obviously they wanted to keep it at a draw. They didn't want it to turn into a loss. But I think after the goodwill of us dodging them the yellow card, they felt obligated to, retroactively fix this score. So we've then gone over to the referees, and we've gone basically the two captains, all the players involved. As a team, we've made an error. We didn't record the scores properly. Can we please retroactively change that to reflect the actual result? And the referees said no. They said basically it's too late. We're about to pair the next round. No. So as a result, we were like, okay, cool. Well, couldn't hurt to ask. And I thanked the Spanish captain and the players for being agreeable here. But unfortunately, we weren't able to retroactively change that score, and therefore Australia did end with a draw, even though technically, based on actual results, we did just win the round. So that's worth factoring in when we go into the conversations about this, that it wasn't contentious, there was no angst or anger or frustration or anything like that. There was maybe a little bit of disappointment at best, but at the end of it, we all shook hands and had a big hug, and they were very appreciative of the yellow card stuff, and we were very appreciative of their willingness to retroactively change scores based on essentially an accounting error. So great round all up, and my round into their Demons play, which we'll get into in a moment, was one of the best games of 40k I've played in a long time in terms of sportsmanship. He was an absolute lovely bloke, really, really funny guy, and had a really good energy about him, and I really, really enjoyed that game. So let's pull up the scores. We'll talk about Team Australia's results, and then we'll get into the details of my game. All right, so here is our results into Spain. As you can see, 75. They got 75 points, we got 85 points, so we were on the winning side of the draw, 1 point away from winning the round. We had Manuel on his Drakari, played into Lockie Riggs Grey Knights and lost, so Lockie got a big win there. We had Gonzalo Raven de la Mondea on Chaos Demons. He played into me, and I got a 0-point loss. I got absolutely pulverized by those demons. So, but as I said, Gonzalo was an absolute legend to play against. Really, really fun guy. Then we had Jordan on his Space Wolves, got a 20-point win into Alejandro, his Grey Knights. So that was a really, really good game there. So that sort of countered out my loss. Then Callum got a 15-point win into Jorge, I believe is how that is pronounced. He got a 5-point loss. So Adeptus Sororitas into Tau. So our Tau player got the win there. Then we had Reese Cunningham, our sisters player, into their Tyranids, Marco, who got a 17-point win for Reese. Matt Morrisoli, with his Chaos Space Marines, played into their Dark Angels player, got a loss, a 7-point loss. Jeremy Martino, with his Thousand Sons, got a 5-point loss into their Tau Empire. And Josh Brody got an 8-point loss with his Necrons into their Thousand Sons. So, really mixed bag of results there. We got, 4 losses, 4 wins. And it just happened that our wins were bigger than our losses were small. And that would have resulted in us getting that 85 points. So, really interesting stuff. Now, let's have a look at Gonzalo's Demons list. This is the list that I versed with my World Eaters. So, really, really fascinating list. So, you're going to jump like popcorn is the name of his list, and it's popcorn with, corn. And a really, really cool list. So he had a Bloodmaster, he had a Bloodthirster with Argath, King of Blades, he had a Great Unclean one with the Endless Gift. So that's the Great Unclean one with the 4-up Feel No Pain. He had 2 Rend Masters. They're the ones that can apply a +1 to like strength attacks, damage, or whatever it is, the buff, AP and damage. Then he had Scarbrand, he had the Skull Taker, he had Celeste, so tons of characters there. And then he had 2 units of Bloodletters, which is really interesting to see. He had a unit of Plague Bearers for sticky objectives. He had a small unit of Blood Crushers and a unit of Seekers. So really, really fascinating list, this one. So going into this, we had actually projected a win. So the night before, we sat down with all of their lists, and I said that I wasn't confident that I could win this. I thought it was going to be a relatively small loss. But a few of the other people on my team really pumped me up, and they're like, nah, man, like, he can't get through the Terminators because you've got the invulnerable saves, and he doesn't have enough attacks. He can only mark you if he can see you, this, that, and whatever. So they basically pumped up my list and pumped me up and got me confident. But I feel like that was probably a mistake, because then when we got into playing the game, it was very apparent very quick that I couldn't kill the Great Unclean one no matter what I did, and he could mince those Terminators like they were butter. And as a result, the game just flew off the rails real fast. My opponent was absolute legend though. So demons, as you guys would know, have the Shadow of the Chaos rule, which basically means that they can deep strike 6 inches away from you and then charge. And they also have a stratagem that allows them to deep strike 3 inches away from you and not charge. So what he would do is he would use the stratagem to 3-inch deep strike away one of these greater demons, which projects Shadow of the Chaos, and then 6 inches away he would drop Bloodletters and charge. And this way he was able to get those Bloodletters in really easily. And at the end of my turn, he can pick up 2 units. So he'd pick up both of those units, then spend a strat to deep strike one in, and then deep strike the other next to it. So as a result, during my deployment, I've deployed my stuff, and I've basically gone, in my first turn, my intent is to move these Jackals to create a big ring around my Terminators, so that you will not be able to charge the Terminators with Bloodletters, right? So I'm measuring things out. I'm measuring 3 inches, 6 inches, this, that, whatever. Chest clock's on me. And my opponent comes over and he's like, would you like me to help? And I'm like, sure. And then he just goes, yep, cool. If you move your Jackals here and you move your Jackals here, I can't go here. And then if you move over here, yep, you're fine. He's like, based on where you're deployed now, I can't charge you. And I was just blown away by that level of sportsmanship. He would have been well within his rights to just say, clock's on you, figure it out. Like, it's not his job to move my models to screen out his units, right? He could have just done that, but he knew what my intent was, and he knew that I had the tools to do it, and he knew that I understood how to do it, because I was clearly articulating, like, if I go here, you're not going to be able to fit there, this, that, whatever, borrowing bases to check base sizes, all that sort of stuff. So he knew that I knew what I was doing, and he knew that I was going to be able to pull this off. So in the interest of speeding the game up, he basically helped me position the models, which was absolutely fantastic. Also, he had a really nifty way of drawing secondaries. So normally you get your deck of secondary cards, you give it a good shuffle, you give it your opponent, you let them split the deck, and now there's no way that they will have cheated and stacked the deck in their favor. And then basically you just draw your 2 cards, right? Whereas what he would do is, instead of him drawing his 2 cards, he would hand me the deck, fan it out, No, sorry. He would take his deck and he would fan it out, and then he would let me draw 2 cards from his deck that are his secondaries. So you could draw them from the top, the middle, wherever, right? Really fascinating way of making sure that your opponent is very clear that you are not trying to cheat with cards because they're the ones drawing your objectives for you. It was really, really funny. And the way he would do it is like he'd drop down onto one knee and he'd fan it out. It was really fascinating way of doing secondaries, and it was a lot of fun. And he was a really high energy guy, and it was really, really cool game. But basically, so in my first turn, I've moved out to fan out to stop his bloodletters from being able to hit me, because at the end of my turn, he can pick them up, and then in his first turn, he can deep strike them in because they started on the table. So from the start of the game, I'm fanning out, I'm trying to screen these things out. He charged his fiends into a unit of jackals. He killed like 3 jackals with his fiends, and then the remaining jackals picked up the entire unit of fiends, which was really interesting. But the real interesting thing is he threw that Great Unclean one onto the center objective. And then in my next turn, I got Area Denial and Bring It Down. And I was like, cool. All of his Bloodthirsters were ages away. He had them all way down the back because I'd used the Jackals to screen him out. He couldn't hit me, so he just stayed further back. And because he can pick them up and then deep strike, he doesn't need to be close. He doesn't need to try to get within charge range or anything like that. He just stays way back. So I was like, cool. The only way that I'm going to get Bring It Down is if I kill that Great Unclean one. The only way that I'm going to get Area Denial is if I kill that Great Unclean one. And also, you're on all these objectives. The only way that I'm going to stop you from scoring massive on your primary is if I kill that Great Unclean one. So I'm like, well, I guess I've got to try, right? I can't just let it sit there. So I threw Khan's unit and a unit of Terminators into it. I put lethal hits on with my Blessings of Cornroll, and I put +1 to wound on the Terminators, and I basically put a unit of 8 bound in there as well to get reroll 1s to wound, and I basically just went nuts, and I was like, I'm going to put all of my damage into this Great Unclean one. And I got it to just below half strength. That thing is unkillable. It is not possible to kill. Like, don't even try, unless you have very specialized weapons like Devastating Wounds, anti-demon stuff. Don't even bother, because I threw so much at it and just bounced. And then in response, he was able to pick up Khan's entire unit, a unit of Terminators, and then a second unit of Terminators had gone off to do some secondaries somewhere else, or to whatever they were doing, trying to kill him off a second objective. And yeah, so in his next turn, he was able to basically go, cool, Scarbrand and a Bloodletter unit hit 1, and with the +1 attack and all the stuff, was able to kill a unit of Terminators. The Bloodthirster and the Rend Master were able to kill another one. Then the Great Unclean one and the Celeste and the Plague Bearers were able to pick up all the Berserkers and the other unit. And I was like, wow, I effectively just got tabled in 1 turn. And there was nothing I could do about it. It was wild. So even if I did kill that Great Unclean one, the end result would have probably been relatively similar. So I think essentially it took 2 turns for all of that to take place. That's like a lot of stuff, right? But essentially within the space of 2 turns, within turns like 3 and 4, I was just tabled. And as a result, in his turns 4 and 5, he was able to score massive primary, get all of his secondaries, get so far ahead of me in victory points that the end result was a 20-0. So absolutely devastating loss for me there. But it was a ripper of a game. And it just goes to show that I actually think that this Terminator list, based on what I've experienced so far, it's much better into shooting heavy armies. Even though it has a lot of combat tricks, into shooting heavy armies, it's really, really good. Whereas when it gets to the point where it's like there's these big combats happening, he was able to chew through. Even when I had the neg 1 damage, it's like he just puts his Bloodletters to 4 damage, and then the neg 1 damage doesn't help. So yeah, it was absolutely brutal, but it was an absolute ripper of a match. And luckily, it didn't really matter, because we wouldn't have won or lost the game, if a few things went differently. Like if I killed the Great Unclean, I probably still would have died. If I survived one of those turns, I probably wouldn't have got victory points anyway. So even though it felt like there was probably a few mistakes that I made, None of those mistakes resulted in me losing the game. I feel like that game was a really, really hard match, especially with him going second, which means he can pick up at the end of my turn and turn one deep strike on me, and a few other things that basically made this matchup a real bad time for the Terminators. And in retrospect, we should have reflected that with the scores and not put me into it. That was the mistake. But if that facilitated everybody else on the team getting good matchups, that's good. And there was not many people on the team that wanted to verse this. So at the end of the day, I'm not too upset with that outcome. And I'm really proud of what the team were able to achieve. So that is my game into Spain. Let's have a talk about Austria now. All right, so Austria into Team Australia, so the two Aussies, and this is a matchup that is a bit of a grudge match or a repeat from last year, Australia versus Austria last year as well. And like last year, we got a decent-sized win into Austria this year. So another round of absolutely fantastic opponents, really great games. The winner of the War Masters GT from the previous year was on the Austrian team this year, as was his twin brother. So we've got some strong players on this team. We knew it was going to be a hard slog, but we dug deep. We rebounded from our draw into Spain, and we were able to bring back a win into Austria. So let's have a look at the numbers. So Austria got 68 points into Australia's 92, so a decent-sized win there. We had Thomas Woback on his Eldari. He got a 12-point win into our Tau Empire player, Callum. I got a 5-point loss with my World Eaters into Lucas Woback's Tyranids list. Josh Brody got a 15-point win with his Necrons versing their Chaos Demons. Reese Cunningham got a 15-point win with his Adeptus Sororitas versing their Leagues of Votan. Jeremy Martino got an 18-point win with his Thousand Sons into their Adeptus Sororitas. Matt Marasoli got a 10-point draw into their Drakari, Sebastian. Jordan Beresford got a 10-point draw with his Space Wolves into their Thousand Sons. And then Lockie Rigg got an 11-point win with his Grey Knights into their Astartes. So there was only 2 losses. One was mine and one was Callum's. Mine was the worst loss, getting only 5 points into their Tyranids list. But overall, the team performed very, very well. And that Tyranids list has some really nifty tricks. And this is what I was talking about, having not prepared into it. We hadn't played any practice games into Tyranids. Nobody on our team plays Tyranids. And as a result, there was a few tricks in there that caught me off guard that resulted in me getting a loss in a matchup that I think if I played it again today, I would probably win. So let's have a look at his list, and then we'll get into the tricks later. So he had a Vanguard list, the one with all the tricks. He had two Brood Lords. He had a Hive Tyrant with Hunting Grounds. Which is, I think that allows him to do Battle Shock tests to you. He had no Neuro Tyrant. He had a Winged Tyranid Prime. He then had 2 units of 10 Gargoyles, 1 Biovore. He had 3 Exocrines, which are a really effective 3 damage shooting piece. He had 2 units of Gene Stealers. These go with the whatever they're called, the Brood Lords, or Boob Lords as we were calling them for fun. Then he had 2 Lictors, 2 Neuralictors, a unit of Tyranid Warriors, and a big unit of Zone Thropes, which go with the what's it called? The Neuro Tyrant goes with those. So yeah, this is a really, really cool list. I'll be honest, we didn't really know what it did. We had a rough idea, but we wildly underestimated the Battle Shock shenanigans that this list is able to do. And basically the way that this game played out was I was punching the hell out of him. Like, I was definitely beating him in the fight, and I was killing a ton of his stuff, and he didn't really have any effective answers for my Terminators outside of those Exocrines. But I was able to basically navigate around the Exocrines so they didn't get to do multiple turns of shooting into me, and as a result, I was definitely beating him on the fight. The problem is, and the reason that this came out as a 5-point loss, is because he has several ways to Battle Shock me. He can Battle Shock me in my fight phase. He could Battle Shock me in... I think he could do it in any phase. He could also do it in the command phase, and multiple times. So as a result, there'd be situations where I'd be like, cool, I'm going to put these Terminators on an objective, and then at the start of my turn, he'd be like, take a Battle Shock test. and I'd pass, and then he'd be like, take another battle shock test. Like he was able to just keep battle shocking me, which was really painful. It meant that he could get around my interrupts. He could charge multiple things into me, battle shock me, and then I couldn't interrupt him. And normally, I'm not a huge fan of battle shock mechanics, but when you have multiple that can trigger off the same unit in the same phase, it becomes a lot more reliable, and you're able to just battle shock the hell out of me. And as a result, I was getting no primary. I wasn't able to do my secondaries because he can battle shock me in my turn, and if I'm battle shocked, I can't cleanse. I can't engage on all fronts. Like there was tons of times where I'm like, I'm just scoring nothing. I'm scoring no points. I'm killing him. He's dead. He ended the game with almost nothing left. But it didn't matter because I wasn't able to score any of my victory points. So I don't know what I realistically could have done differently. Maybe if I had a bit more of an understanding of the list, I would have been able to target the things that can inflict battle shock tests. And that's probably where I made the mistake. I should have been going for those neuro tyrants. I should have been going for the whatever they're called, the lictor thingies, the neurolictors or whatever. The ones that are divvying out all these battle shock tests. And the other thing that I should have done is sandbag objectives a little bit harder. Because if you have 3 units on an objective and 2 of them fail their battle shock test, it doesn't matter because you have the third and you can still score it. Whereas I was, partly because of the way my list is built, but also partly because of the way I played it, is I was putting too few units on the objectives, and as a result, he would battle shock me, and I just wouldn't score the primary. And then in the next turn, I'd be like, well, now I want to go and do this action. And he'd be like, yep, well, I'm going to battle shock you when you can't do the action. So it became really, really challenging to score victory points into this list, and my opponent played it very, very well. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly how to use those battle shock tests. And even though things like Terminators and Berserkers are relatively good leadership and they're relatively hard to force them to fail those battle shock tests, because he was able to layer them and stagger them, he was able to do quite good with them. And as a result, it was just a wash. It was essentially a bad game for me. And I think, retroactively, I think if I had played practice games into this, I probably would have avoided the matchup instead of taking it. And even if I did take it, I would have had completely different target priority. My target priority was bad, and I didn't go for the things that I should have. I was focused on trying to kill the things that I perceived as damage dealers. I was sending 8-bound into exocrines, I was sending Terminators into exocrines, making sure I kill those, thinking if I kill those, he then doesn't have the ability to damage me, like killing his Zoanthropes, for example. If I can do that, he can't do damage to me, and if he can't do damage to me, I just win, right? But turns out it's actually the other way around. What I should have done is killed all of his stuff that can battle shock me, and then scrap and actually get victory points along the way. So that was a big lesson for me, versing the Tyranids for the first time in probably over a year. First time in over a year that I played against the Tyranids since early edition. So I didn't do the homework. I didn't, it's one of those things where because nobody on the team plays Tyranids, we didn't have anyone that could be like, watch out for this, make sure you kill that first. We didn't have that. And as a result, I've just looked at it and I'm like, I'm not seeing anything in there that really cares about, that the Terminators really care about. I'm not seeing anything that threatens the Terminators. But I was just looking at damage profiles. I wasn't factoring in all of the different ways that he can battle shock me. So, yeah. Overall, it was a great game, and my opponent was an absolute sweetheart. He was lovely, and he was very, he didn't pull any gotchas, right? Like, he gotcha'd me in a way, in that he battle shocked me, but he didn't, surprise me with anything. He was very clear about what his things did. Perhaps I could have asked more questions at the start of the game, and just been like, cool, what abilities do you have? How does your battle shock stuff work? And then, updated my plan based on that information. But he definitely wasn't withholding any information or anything like that. He was very forthcoming and a very lovely guy. So, yeah, great game. But unfortunately, that's the second loss for me. So the wheels are definitely starting to come off the 30-nator wagon at this point. But the team is still performing really, really well. We've got some really strong numbers on the board. And we're going into the final day of the event undefeated. So we've got 1 draw and 4 wins, and we were currently in 2nd place. So going into that last day, Team Australia are feeling good. We're feeling strong. We're really happy with our results so far. We're really proud of what we've been able to achieve, and the team's spirits were really high. We went out for drinks that night. We celebrated a little bit. Perhaps we celebrated a little bit too early, but I was so proud of what we'd achieved that, you know, I was like, dessert's on me, guys. Let's have fun. Let's unwind and decompress, because the last thing I wanted to do was go into that last day with an immense sense of pressure on top of us. I wanted to make sure that we celebrate what we achieved and be really proud of our results, which we were. But yeah, so that rounds out this video. The next video is going to be talking about the finals, our games into Poland and into France. Really, really fantastic rounds there. So we'll talk about that in the next video. If you've been enjoying this series so far, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Team Australia and the WTC, head over to teamoz40k.com and you can find a whole bunch more information about Team Australia there and about the WTC there. And also, if you want to follow some of the antics and the ridiculous stuff that we got up to along the way, check out the Risky Rollers YouTube channel or riskyrollerstv.com. And they did a vlog throughout the process, as well as lots of live content as well that was really interesting and really exciting to watch. So if you want to, you know, see what Australia got up to while we were in Europe, that's a great place to do it as well. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Look for the blood god.